Hello everyone and welcome back to CyberCaste. Today we have a design. Today we'll be talking about design and the impact that it has on SaaS and other technology and other tech products. We have Dan with us. Hello Dan.
Hello.
Hi. Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Yes. So, as Mariam just said, my name is Dan. I am a design leader. I'm based here in London. Um, I've been working in the digital and product design field for going on to 15 years now. So, I've worked and led design teams across a number of different industries. I've worked in large global in-house teams like More Than. As well as agency side as well, steering design for brands like De Beers, Ocado, Rolls-Royce, and some very large well-known names. Most recently, I've led design for a company called Julo. Julo is a company I co-founded in 2020. It's a B2B knowledge management tool specifically built for enterprise product, marketing, design teams. So lots of designers, researchers, data scientists, marketers using that product. Some of the brands we work with include Mozilla, The Guardian, Reddit, Udemy. So some very big names there as well. And yeah, right now, I'd say my role somewhat sits in the intersection of design and strategy. It's definitely where I feel I get the most enjoyment and fulfillment. And yeah, hopefully where I add the most value. So yeah, looking forward to talking a little bit more about my experiences today.
Okay. So you look pretty passionate about design.
Yes, yeah, very much so. I've
Very much so.
always been interested in design. I studied graphic design and graphic art when I was at university. But before that, even at school, I was always interested in design as well. So I had a fairly clear path fairly early on. So I was quite lucky in that respect.
Okay, so it would be right to say that destiny played a huge role in where you are today.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Can you recall one of your earliest designs that you worked on?
So on the earliest designs, yeah, of course. I mean, some of the earliest work as a designer is often the stuff that's not paid for, the stuff that you do at university, possibly even before that as well. I always tried my best to get as much professional experience in design as early as possible. And so, yeah, I worked on some freelance projects when I was at university, and I still remember some of those. And it's where you're starting to understand where you perhaps need some improvement, where you're naturally going to be good at. For me, some of those early branding projects that I did were definitely interesting, but I realized that wasn't necessarily the direction I wanted to take my career. And where I had the most fulfillment and enjoyment was the earlier projects that I did where I was more working in a digital product capacity. So UX, design, working with stakeholders, large organizations. Um, yeah, so that would be some of the sort of earlier experiences I had. But I think at the beginning, you need to do a variety of different types of projects with different types of companies to get a better sense of the type of designer that you want to be and the type of company you want to work in as well.
Okay. So what was the point where you felt that you have made it, that this is what you want to do for the rest of your life?
Oh, I wouldn't say I necessarily am at the point where I realize I want to do this for the rest of my life. I mean, I think that I will always have that passion towards design and want to be involved in the creative processes. More recently, I've been less in a design craft role and more in that sort of leadership strategy role around design. And that's definitely an area that I'm extremely passionate about as well, and looking forward to continuing to develop throughout the rest of my career. But I think when I was at More Than, which was one of the first companies I worked for as a dedicated designer, there were several projects that I worked on there where some very small changes to a very large and complex flow had a very big impact. And I think it was at that point when I realized this is an exciting space that I'd like to continue working in and developing skills around. And working within that digital product space is probably where I wanted to focus my efforts in my career. And so I'd say probably, 10, 15 years ago, I was working in those environments and realized that that's what I wanted to do for the foreseeable future.
Okay. So over the past few years, can you think of a specific project that a project or design flow that made your product more inclusive, more more inviting for people of determination?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to, so I mean, I think that accessibility often gets overlooked. When I was working with De Beers, for example, we just gone through a very large rebrand, and we recognized that not all of the color palette was even double A accessible, let alone triple A. And so we looked to adjust that color palette and create a deeper color contrast and input affordances for things like forms. Um, and yeah, ultimately massively improve the completion rates. But these things are easy to miss if you're designing for yourself, or when you're maybe designing for a luxury brand where double A standards and sort of always adhering to accessibility can feel a little bit clunky, a little bit less sophisticated from a design perspective. And so it's quite an interesting challenge that you have there to make those all luxury brands compliant and accessible, but also have that sort of luxury finesse to the style that you're designing. So yeah, it's something that in that particular instance, I worked with the brand designers directly, but also the stakeholders at De Beers as well, and ultimately found a solution that kind of met accessibility standards, but had that level of luxury that they were looking for in the brand. And so, yeah, that's not easy to find. Often it's a case of experimenting with different approaches and just working directly and collaborating with the various different stakeholders that are involved and the brand team as well. I think there's a misconception often in sort of product design that we make some of these decisions, but actually a lot of those sort of font decisions and color decisions have already been made by brand designers.
Yeah,
So
good, yeah.
face it, working with them as well to ensure that you know
Uniform.
we can translate that into a digital experience which is accessible, uh, which doesn't dilute the brand too much, or if it does change the brand, work with them to make sure that it's being consistent across all communications as well. So, yeah, I'd say that sort of that experience was really quite prevalent in De Beers. There's quite an interesting challenge around that.
Okay. So if you had to sum up your design philosophy in a few words, what would it be? And what is like that one design rule that you would never skip out?
So I think when it comes to design philosophy, I would sort of look for clarity. Um, I think that that's an extremely important philosophy to have is, building for clarity. But of course, empathy as well. Whenever we work in designs, we're not just designing something for the sake of designing it. Design has a purpose. And so depending on the business goal or the user goal that we're working towards, ideally a blend of the two, we need to have empathy towards our users, our customers, but also our stakeholders as well. And to achieve that, we really need to dive deeper into the problem space, truly understand our users and also the business goals themselves, and find solutions that kind of hit all of those. And so I'd say, yeah, clarity and empathy would definitely be kind of core philosophies for me. That alongside also collaboration. I think that when we are working, particularly in a larger team, but also from my more recent experience in startups, collaboration is extremely important. As designers, we're not here to do everything. We're not here to necessarily have all of the answers or go away and come back with fully finished designs. I think that the process itself, the design process, is built for collaboration and getting different inputs from different stakeholders and different disciplines. I'm very much a believer that good ideas can come from anywhere. And so as a designer, you're really in a strong position to help bridge the gap between the business and the user and bring people together in your team around that. How can we design for better solutions using the inputs from engineers who are going to be building it, from data scientists who are going to be ultimately analyzing the outputs, through product managers who are representing the business, through different stakeholders? How can we collaborate more effectively? So I think that probably, yeah, clarity, empathy, collaboration are definitely really important philosophies that I work towards. But in terms of sort of more specifically a SaaS product itself, I think probably one non-negotiable SaaS principle is just to reduce cognitive load. If people feel overwhelmed, they'll abandon the journey. They won't use the product. No matter how powerful the end result or the promised land may be, if something is overly complex or difficult to use or difficult to understand, then you're just not going to get adoption, which in SaaS is exactly what you're looking for. Ultimately, we're looking for initial acquisition of a customer, or you're looking for adoption to start generating revenues, ideally recurring revenues as well. And so, yeah, you need something that's going to be something that's reasonably easy to use, something that people will want to carry on using. And so I think reducing cognitive load as much as possible is definitely been a worthwhile investment in my experience.
Okay. Since we're talking about collaboration, how important of a role do you think designers and the UX writers play in the UX design at the end?
So I think, as I mentioned, design and UX or UX writing, it very much falls under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
But it is very much the glue of the process in a sense. I typically like to work in products trios. What I mean by that is where you are the design representative and you're working closely within a team alongside a product manager and an engineer. So that's the kind of three triangle points of a strong kind of core product team, if you like. And really, if you consider design's role within that, you are bridging the gap between the business goals that the product manager is communicating. So what are we trying to achieve? Are we looking to improve retention? Are we looking to improve acquisition or reduce churn? Whatever it may be, that's the goals of the business. It's design's job to understand those goals, but also recognize the goals of the user and the customer so that we can build solutions that meet both the business goal, but also the user's goals. And that's a sweet spot where we can build lovable products. And so it's design's role to understand those business goals, understand the customer goals, build something which is desirable, but also work with the engineer to ensure that it's viable and technical feasible as well. We need to make sure that any solutions that we're proposing are going to be realistic to build and something that is feasible within the budget or feasible technically within the product constraints that we have. And so the designer's role is really to be that bridge between the product manager, the engineer, or in other words, the business and the customer. So yeah, very much a glue role, if you like.
Okay. Now, if we move towards personal preference, in design, what do you prefer, the light mode or the dark mode?
It's an interesting question. I think that for me personally, I prefer light mode. I pretty much always work in light mode. But I can see the benefits of dark mode. I think dark mode is great for focus, particularly at nighttime when your surroundings are darker. It's less contrast and less, strain on your eyes. Preference for me personally is light mode for presenting, reviewing things with teams as well.
Yeah.
I feel it's contextual. But at the same time, I think that light or dark mode is very much a personal preference. And so, yeah, good design should adapt with the environment as well, or have the options to be able to adapt to the user's preferences.
Okay. Over the years, whenever I've asked this question to a designer, they've always gone with the light mode. And whenever I've asked from the users, they always go with the dark mode. So
It's an interesting insight that you developed there. Then,
it's mainly because what I've felt with designers, it's better, like it's more clear, concise when it comes to light mode. It does not, it shows everything clearly. With the dark mode,
yeah,
I think it helps you focus. That's why users mostly like it.
interesting. Yeah, no, it's quite a fascinating trend that kind of came about not that long ago, but I don't think it's necessarily been explored to the full potential that it has. at the moment we also have just light and dark mode, but I believe that AI might eventually be able to unlock us having more flexibility and essentially personalized kind of palettes, if you like, to enable us to focus with what works best for us individually.
Yeah, see, if I talk about myself, whenever I'm working as a UX writer, I would always prefer the light mode because it helps me make better user flows, better designs. But whenever I'm using as an end user, I always go with the dark mode. I mean, my Gmail would always be in the dark mode, but the product I would working be on would be in the light mode. So
Yeah,
okay.
personal preferences.
So the preferences, right? So
If Dan, when it comes to working with product and engineering teams, how big of a role do you think design really plays?
So can you say that last bit again? Sorry, when I'm working with product
Yeah.
managers.
So when you're working with product with engineering teams, so how big of a role do you think design can play, according to you?
So I think that depending on the type of designer you are, determine the level or the role in which you have. So more recently, as a design leader, I'm more than happy to support in the prioritization process. For example, the discovery process. And so some pure designers would be working more specifically within the solution space. And so they maybe proceed a roadmap, like something that they need to design. It's already been validated and they just need to provide the designs to the engineer. And at which point, you're playing an extremely important role, but your role will be quite specific on that context. And that would be typically more junior to midway designers that would be performing those tasks. I think as you become more senior, maybe up to principal level or design leadership level, your input starts earlier. So you may well much deeper in the discovery process. And so you may extend foundational research to to identify what insights we're working towards and on what designs we could produce in order to actually help shape the roadmap rather than be wafted to the roadmap. And so in those cases, in my experience, I've always enjoyed the actual prioritization part of that. So we've gone through the discovery, we've discovered some really key insights, we've come up with some ideas that could help alleviate, some of the problems that our users are experiencing. And at which point I would like to work directly with engineers as well as product managers to understand how we go about prioritizing those ideas and which ideas we should test. That involvement of designer is obviously a much broader role than a more specific point in which you're doing more reactive design. And so I think it really comes down to the level of seniority. But as you become more senior as a designer, I think there's much opportunities to help lead that direction and lead projects in that sense and really be the voice of customer at the highest level of the organization.
So can you tell me about a time when your design actually saved the day or fixed a big user headache? Something recent.
Yeah. So I think one of my favorite examples of this would actually be when optimizing the modern car insurance journeys. There's lots of more recent examples that I've had, but I think this one helps to demonstrate a few different things. So I was working as the lead designer on the car insurance journey at more than. The challenge was the car insurance product was underperforming. So conversion targets weren't being hit, and the product manager had raised this with some senior stakeholders. And ultimately, my role was to look deeper into why that was happening and test some solutions to try and get the product back on track. So all we had to go on at this stage, there was a 38% drop off after the prospective customers had entered their details and before they even saw the quote. So I'm not sure to get with their car insurance quote before, but it's a normal and painful process. You have to put in a lot of files of data, sometimes to 60 different inputs. And so it didn't make sense that users would put in this much information and then just drop off or leave the journey before they even saw the quote itself. And so we decided to run some user tests of the existing user journey. We also did some user interviews as well. And importantly, these were conducted for a mixture of remote and in-person meeting. So we found that 75% of remote public participants encountered a blank loading screen for at least 18 to 20 seconds. Also, some quotes were taking as long as 45 seconds to actually return. And so we understood that the problem here might actually be with the connection or the Wi-Fi connection. And it wasn't something that would have been immediately obvious for us to understand in testing that within the office. And so, we formed that into a problem statement. I mean, just ultimately had the goal of, buying time, but also potentially building some trust as well. And while the system generates the quote. And so we tested in the end, I think it was 4 different solutions on the live site, which included one test where we just asked the user to provide one last piece of information on the sort of a fast loading landing page, which we told them was for security purposes. So that ended up actually being the winning solution. Not only did it buy us time, but it also made the quote more secure, but it also increased trust from our users as well. And so the overall impact, I believe, is about 8% uplift in conversion, which for a product the size of More Than led with an additional sort of £1 million plus in revenue over the next year. And so the reason that I still talk about these experiments today is because I feel they help to demonstrate that you don't need to have a huge budget or a big impact sort of roadmap item to just create this real return on investment or a big impact from your design work. And actually, if you focus time on understanding the users, identifying what motivates them, also uncovering some hidden friction like an internet connection like we had in this particular example, then you can actually often deliver results that far outperform expensive roadmap features, which might sound like exciting ideas when you're talking about them in a workshop. But sometimes it's the smallest little things that can have the biggest impact. And that's why I quite like that particular example.
So is there a recent SaaS trend, design trend that you think deserves more hype? Something that's underrated for you?
Yeah. Good question. I think that micro contextual guidance, I'm not sure if that's the official term for it, but that's the way I typically describe it. Essentially showing people just enough information to help them at the moment that they need it, rather than building these super complex and sort of long onboarding flow dumps. I think that at Julo, we made the mistake initially of building such a complex user flow that we were trying to show everyone every feature from the very beginning in the first time they logged in. But, with any kind of complex product, not only can that be overwhelming, it can be boring. And when things are boring, it's difficult to remember the key details that you need as a user. And so we actually made a decision to scale back the onboarding experience to make it more enjoyable, to actually gamify that somewhat. But what we found was that people actually enjoyed that more, but they remembered the key features and the areas the most. And so what I mean by sort of micro contextual guidance is that beyond that initial simplified onboarding flow, when a user discovers a new area in the tool, which is important, it would then at that point, the product would kick in to show you sort of how that particular area or that particular feature actually works, rather than trying to give them all the information at once in the beginning kind of a boarding flow. So I'd say that would definitely be a sort of design trend that I'm seeing a lot more in products now. I think onboarding flows have simplified a lot, and I think that's for good reason. But I also see more thoughtful motion design as well. These little small tiny animations that can help guide attention of a user, or maybe reduce some friction and just provide that sort of extra delightful finesse on a product. It's often these little tiny interactions or small animations that people remember. And so those are the experiences that they sort of talk about and they share with their peers or their colleagues, because you can tell that this product has been well thought through as well. So I'd say thoughtful use of some motion design and sort of interactions is also something that I'm seeing more of as well, which I think is a positive thing.
Okay. In the recent SaaS products, what is that one product that you think is really, really well designed?
Say that again. Sorry, Mariam.
In the recent SaaS products, which one SaaS product would you think is like really good design, really well designed?
Good question. In terms of SaaS products, I mean,
It could be social media tool, could be anything.
yeah, I mean, I think that the example that I would always kind of go back to, which is more of a B2C product, is Spotify. I just think that it's a
Yes.
brilliantly designed tool, but it also has a lot of features within there that perhaps are not flagship features, but just create that small bits of user delight that people often talk about. So as an example, the discovery feature or discover weekly feature, I think it's called in Spotify, I always find particularly powerful because, you know, it shares just 30 or so songs with the user, although the algorithm allows them to produce as many songs as they want to suggest to their users, they limit the number. And so the purpose of that being that you're actually not overwhelming the user, but you're creating this sort of space in which people can discover new music, but be incentivized to come back every week and check out the next 30 songs. And so I think it's just a really powerful example of how a feature can create just a small amount of highly personalized content that keeps the user coming back. And actually, I was reflecting on this with a friend not so long ago, and they mentioned that Spotify would be one of the few products that they would happily share their data with, because it seems to be extremely powerful at being able to absorb your own data and produce highly personalized, valuable content. And so I think it's a good example of a product that can do that, where people are more than happy to give their data, as opposed to lots of other products where they would probably feel less energized to do so.
Okay. Since you're talking about Spotify, why do you think other similar products were not able to achieve the same level of popularity as Spotify did, like SoundCloud?
Within the music industry,
Yeah, like SoundCloud and all, they were like pretty similar in terms of when they were first launched. But if you look at them today, SoundCloud looks like pretty old as compared to Spotify.
yeah, I mean, I think that there's several examples. There's industry factors. As far as I understand, Spotify took advantage of legislation differences in the EU and the US, which definitely supported their growth and gave them that opportunity to really penetrate the market and really, ultimately change the music industry for good. But I also think that the experience, as I mentioned there, is a key factor. As you mentioned, comparative to other streaming services, and iTunes at the time was probably their biggest competitor. The user experience was always put at the forefront. I think when we consider things like iTunes, it was the music which was the kind of core experience.
Yeah.
Whereas Spotify, albeit on a slightly different commercial model, obviously subscription versus pay per song, which is iTunes, which definitely would have had an impact as well. But aside from that, Spotify very famously have extremely mature product design and UX philosophies, many of which are copied throughout the industries outside of the music industry. The Spotify model for product design is something that's been replicated across many different companies that I've worked in as well. They have a tribal model. They have a distributed design model where you work within your own team, where you have a dedicated designer, a dedicated product manager, dedicated researcher. And to my point earlier, I think that really creates collaborative environments where you can really develop the user experience far better than that sort of old school, more waterfall approach or centralized approach that people typically were taking at the time. And so whether that's right or wrong approach to do today remains to be seen, because there's definitely some challenges with that more distributed approach as well. But I think that the way that they approach products and put users and design at the forefront of decisions that they make as a business has definitely been one of the influencing factors to their success.
Okay. Okay. Coming towards the almost last question, I would like to ask if you would go back in time, pick up an old school product, redesign it using AI or VR,
Yeah.
what would it be and how would you do it?
Yeah, good question. So, I think there's lots of different products that, are ripe.
But like
for
top of the
disruption.
mind, which one would you pick?
So I wouldn't necessarily choose a product specifically. I think I would choose a genre or a sort of an area of quest, and that would be email. I think that email is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's very much stuck in the 1990s. I rebuild email from the ground up as more of a sort of knowledge and collaboration layer. I know that there's definitely some very exciting startups and scale ups on the market today that are looking to reinvent email. And I think that's a real strong spot for reinvention, not just basic text messages going back and forth. I think we should have more threads, more context, more decisions kind of surfaced intelligently instead of being buried, but also more importantly, organizations where you have 1,000+ people sending 10+ emails a day. If we were to leverage AI across all of those emails, I guarantee that it would be, or it certainly unlock lots of new opportunities if we were looking for different patterns, gaps, overlaps, maybe inconsistencies and efficiencies. I think that there'd be a huge untapped potential if organizations were able to leverage AI to get the compounding impact of all the emails being sent across an organization. So yeah, I think I would sort of look as that sort of interesting challenge to maybe go after.
Don't you think with people doing so many mistakes in emails already, that would be a huge disaster for teams?
In some cases, maybe. I mean, I'm not sure about you guys, but for me personally, very rarely would I be like writing a long email now without support. But
Oh yeah, and defense for that.
so I think AI is already impacting the email sort of space. I would just take that to another level, I think.
Okay, good answer. I really like your answer. Uh, okay, so to wrap it up, a few personal questions. What do you think is the one designer tool, one designer app that you really like? Like a hardware and a software, a mouse or a tool, anything like that.
So like a piece of software and a piece of hardware that I
Yeah.
really like. For me, the piece of hardware would have to be the iPhone. I think that this for me changed everything. Um, I think that it changed the way that humans interact with digital interfaces. It created this opportunity to build products which are more responsive and adaptive and, give us that ability to do that wherever we are in the world. And I think that I still remember in 2007 seeing Steve Jobs announce the iPhone and talk about this two-way marketplace called the App Store that they were going to create. And yeah, it was just an incredible sort of moment in technological history, I think. And so there's a piece of hardware, certainly the iPhone. I think that advanced us and the products with our everyday use of technology dramatically. And from a software perspective, I would say something really boring. I think that something like ChatGPT has been the equivalent leap in advancements. If we consider sort of the technological leaps from sort of the invention of the internet, I think that generative AI, obviously more mainstream is ChatGPT, but there's tons of great applications of that technology and generative AI. But I think that's been the next leap, which is going to unlock so much potential from a design perspective, but also much broader perspective. I think we're going to see lots of interesting products and platforms being developed as a result of that, in the same way that we did when the internet became more mainstream. prior to that as well. So yeah, probably the iPhone and ChatGPT, the biggest products out there in terms of sort of like just the biggest impact and influence that they've had and will continue to have.
Okay, were you able to review the new Apple event today that happened today?
I didn't actually. No, I haven't. I typically sort of catch up with the highlights of these events because they're quite long. Have you?
No, I did not get the time yet, but after work, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was very nice talking to you, Dan. We had a lot of fun. You gave us some really good insights. Love the Spotify example.
Good. No, I'm glad. Yeah, it's been great talking to you guys as well. And yeah, we've provided some insights. That's it. My experiences was that. Yeah, what I find interesting.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Thanks. So, would you like to say something to conclude the interview, the podcast?
No, I think it covered a lot of what we've done so far. Definitely check out Julo, our product, if you're working in the digital, very much around knowledge management, insight management. And so a lot of what I've talked about today would likely be relevant to that if you are collecting insights about your users, about your customers, about your business. That's ultimately we use AI to organize and identify different patterns, gaps, opportunities for that as well. So if that's something you're looking into or interested in the moment, do check out julo.io. And yeah, best of luck with anything design related. You can find me on LinkedIn. Do feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to sort of connect with people that are passionate about design, and yeah, keep an eye out for my different posts around that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dan.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.